The Darwinian theory or the Darwinian model for evolution is one which is widely accepted in academia and in our popular understanding and culture as not only valid but completely and utterly scientifically true. And there is much evidence and facts which go up to support that claim. And indeed, it's very much been verified by a huge number of scientists and a big part of the scientific community. Yet there's an interesting point which comes up with especially Darwinistic evolution, or how it would apply in a social context, and our understandings of morality. The intersection of morality and Darwinism is one which raises a few eyebrows and causes a few uncomfortable backturns and looks. And the reason being is because a purely Darwinistic worldview in morality would necessitate a very cruel framework, not only for understanding the human condition and human nature, but for how we would treat other people. It's interesting that one of the primary proponents of especially neo-Darwinism in the modern era, in the current era, Richard Dawkins, has commented on the need not to perhaps apply Darwinism in an ethical and moral context, even if its biological conclusions are sound very much. So, an example of this, in his book The Selfish Gene, which I was recently reading, he writes regarding the fact that Darwinism, or the Darwinistic theory or model of evolution, should permeate philosophy and the humanities, and that a large part of these subjects should be understood through the lens of this theory. Yet he does not quite extend this same logic, this same line of reasoning to morality, perhaps. And he explicitly, in fact, denies extending it to morality and ethics elsewhere. And he emphasizes the importance of empathy and kindness and altruism as a social virtue that we should cultivate within our societies and that we should treat other people well. He makes a distinction perhaps between what is and what ought to be, what the biological reality is, and what ought to be based on the fact that we should be altruistic to each other. It's a very interesting notion, therefore, that many of the primary proponents of Darwinistic evolution would still take great strides to avoid using it in the realm of morality. Although evolution theory on a scientific basis may be rigorous, there still is a fundamental need, perhaps, and this is the point to be made here, to understand it through a metaphysical framework, such that it does not necessitate or lead to tyranny or oppression or immorality. And this is a subconscious realization that many people do have with Darwinism, because, like I said, if we were to apply it as a purely Darwinistic moral code, then that would in fact lead to a very kind of cruel world we would have. And in that sense, then, it's very much important to evaluate these scientific narratives of our day in a metaphysical context and a metaphysical framework. It's also interesting to note that all of the various parts of the political spectrum at one point or the other have claimed that they are the science or that they represent the science. And similarly, in our current era, the left-wing libertarians in particular, and especially those represented in the New Age movement, the New Age sort of atheists or the New Atheist movement, such as those, the likes of Richard Dawkins or Neil deGrasse Tyson, or these people like Sam Harris, these new atheists represent this left-wing libertarian thought, and they would claim that they represent the science or scientific truths. Yet, it's also interesting that they themselves would put limits, that they themselves would not expand this to perhaps the logical conclusions that it would necessitate, or they wouldn't take, let's say, Darwinism to its very logical conclusion, which would lead to a very extreme worldview, mind you. Yet, it's something that they themselves are conscious of not to fall into. this also calls into play how we need to demarcate these sciences. Natural sciences have a certain field that they study, a certain object or subject that they study. It cannot be expanded to all fields of study. It cannot be expanded to things like ethics, metaphysics, or philosophy per se, because these things have different areas of study than the natural sciences. Thus, this discussion of how Darwinism or scientific facts intersect or don't intersect with morality or moral facts, it demonstrates an important discussion to be had of how we demarcate the different sciences, the different disciplines. What's the role that ethics has to play? What's the role that philosophy and metaphysics has to play? What's the role that natural sciences has to play? Does a decisive conclusion in one of these or decisive judgment in one of these necessitate a decisive judgment in another field or in all of them together or not?